Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Monday, June 22nd. This is your daily Buckeye fix from BuckeyeScoop.com. I'm Tom Orr, and today I'm joined by James Crepea. He's the Oregon Ducks beat writer for the Oregonian and Oregon Live, and he's the host of the James Crepea Show on Fox Sports Radio in Eugene. He's also a graduate of Ohio State. James, thanks for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Tom.
So we are obviously here to talk that Week 2 game between the Buckeyes and Ducks. It looks like it could be one of the biggest non-conference games of the season anywhere this fall, but there are obviously still a lot of questions about what that game could look like. Back in May, Oregon's Governor Kate Brown said there would not be any major sporting events with fans in the stands through at least September. Has anything changed on that front, and what's the latest on that game and sports in general in Oregon right now?
Yeah, so when Governor Brown had made those remarks that day back in early May, it was really just a confluence of it was of her own making, but it was just a confluence of just a comedy of errors, where in a press conference that was really supposed to be about laying out the plan to the state and to the citizenry about what the phased approach, as we all know, all over the country now, everybody's in some different phase and number, letter, color, something, whatever their state protocol is. At that time, it was supposed to be laying out the plan for what phase one is to the state and what's all involved and et cetera. And an hour later, the only thing that anybody got from it across the entire country was Oregon's governor said there's no sports through September, which was not what she actually said, but she lost the objective on her own regard in that because she really misspoke and allowed herself to be misquoted and mischaracterized, and that was her own doing. No doubt about it. And I was very critical of her for that because for a myriad reasons. But bottom line was, it wasn't entirely what she said. She laid out at the time that it was the current recommendation at that time of the state health authority that events be either canceled or significantly modified. There was no detail, like all good politicians. There's never any detail. There's no specificity. What does significantly modified mean? It's the current recommendation on what I believe that was May the 7th. What did that mean for September the 5th or September the 12th? Who could possibly have made that proclamation 4 months out with indefinite detail, when at that point we're only 2 months into the pandemic? So it was just a mess as far as just the details at that time. Fast forward to where we are now, and obviously voluntary workouts have begun pretty much, I think, almost everywhere in the country at this point, other than Oklahoma. And a couple other places are starting today on this Monday, including in the Pac-12. But Oregon's begun, Oregon State's begun. The state is largely in phase 2 of a phase 3 process, where phase 3 is basically back to full-blown normal as we know it. So I think this is as far as I know, this is going to be the quote-unquote new normal that we're all going to have to get used to, where there might just be some modifications along the way. But long answer to a short question, where things stand is there's still probably going to have to be those whatever significant modifications might be. Yes, but Lane County, Oregon, where Eugene is based and where I'm based as well, has been one of the counties least impacted and least affected, fortunately. We hope that continues to be the case for forever. But I would say to anybody who is planning to attend or is lined up to have a ticket to attend September 12th, Oregon and Ohio State, there's probably not going to be 54,000 fans in the stands. But I couldn't tell you today if there's going to be 50% attendance, 25% attendance, or what the number is going to be between now and then. I know Oregon's modeling for every one of those options for physical, based on the physical distancing guidelines that we know about today. This conversation 2 or 3 weeks ago probably was a lot more encouraging to the idea of 50% or more. This conversation today, based on what's going on around the country, is probably far more pessimistic in that regard. I have no idea what it's going to mean in the middle of September because, like I say, so far, Lane County, Oregon has been, there's less than 100 cases since the beginning. Is that going to continue to be the case by the time the game rolls around? I haven't a clue. But I just do know that I think at this point, it sounds like by all measures, games are on schedule and will be played as scheduled. But as to attendance, your guess is as good as mine.
You had mentioned Oregon players back on campus and working out now. That sounds like it's a fairly similar model to what Ohio State's doing, where they signed a form acknowledging safety protocols before returning to the facility. How has that been going? Have they had issues with guys coming back infected or being infected there, or is that going pretty smoothly so far?
Yeah, so there's not a pledge or any other legal wrangling. There's no need for signing one's life away for Oregon's athletic department. Fortunately, it's a pretty short and to the point, just 6 bullet point document. No, even the most hardened of legal minds would probably not look at this as a true waiver, or doesn't even say the word responsibility, let alone waiver of liability, indemnification, or anything to the effect. Or it also doesn't lay out in 2 pages all the specifics as the Buckeye pledge did. Boy, that was one heck of a document. Yes, players are back. The freshmen, some of the freshmen who were summer enrollees have been arriving over the course of the last few days. I believe they'll be starting their workouts either late this week or a week from now. Basically, there's that 1 week kind of quarantine period and isolation period when they arrive. So a good portion of the players had returned prior to workouts starting here on the 15th. So they had arrived either on the 8th or had arrived even earlier if they had been here the whole time, kind of thing. But they got tested. They started on the 15th. Other players showed up later that week. We'll start this Monday, and like I say, some of the freshmen will be arriving or have arrived, and then they'll start probably a week from now. It's a phased approach of just bringing guys in. Oregon has not reported any athlete testing positive. There's been one student test positive on June the 12th. That's all that's been noted from the campus. I've been trying to confirm whether or not that person is an athlete or not. The athletic department has not confirmed that. The university won't confirm that, and public health officials won't confirm that. So all we know at this point is that there's one student at the campus that had very limited contact. Does that sound like it could be an athlete? Well, yeah. Given that we knew that there were football players showing up leading into workouts on the 15th and they were being tested on the 11th and 12th, is it possible there was an athlete? Yes, but I can't say that definitively. And even if it is, it's just one at this time, based on what we know at this point.
Ohio State got 3 spring practices in. I think Oregon got in 4. How do you think that is going to impact this team this year? I mean, they have the big question that I think everyone, even if you just sort of peripherally follow Oregon, hey, Justin Herbert's not there anymore. So Tyler Shuck seemed like he might be the guy who was kind of the next guy in line, but then they got grad transfer Anthony Brown from Boston College. Do you have any idea how that may be shaking out and how much the lack of spring practice time could hurt their development, either one of those guys?
Well, it definitely is going to have an impact, but I mean, they're not the only school in America replacing a quarterback. Let's make that abundantly clear. I mean, that's all part of life. That's part of the college football experience. Now, replacing a quarterback who was a first-round pick, oh yeah, hey, I mean, I'm not going to say it's not significant. Let's not kid ourselves. But I do think that, for instance, I do think that Oregon and the storyline here has definitely been made to be far more significant than even a place like LSU, where, I mean, shoot, they lost far more than just Joe Burrow. and it just seems like everybody's kind of accepting the fact that LSU is going to take a very different approach because they lost so much talent at one time that it's almost like in a sheer abundance. They can't just focus on the quarterback position. It's just the sheer volume of players they have to replace. Here, all right, yeah, it is focused on quarterback. So having only 4 spring practices, is that a difference and a certainly not ideal. Yeah, but everybody's in that boat. Um, as far as some kind of limitation to spring, there's only a couple schools anywhere that got all of spring in and not terribly high in the FBS level. I think it was UConn and East Carolina were the only two, I believe. So it definitely is not ideal. That said, you mentioned Anthony Brown. I mean, he wasn't here in the spring anyway. Now, if it exactly would have worked out, may he have gotten here very, very late in the game in the spring? Yeah, but he was still recovering from an ACL injury that he had suffered at Boston College. So even if nothing had happened on the pandemic and life been truly normal as we knew it, him joining the program would have been almost definitely in a totally virtual capacity, even throughout the spring in the first place. So it definitely creates a interesting competition situation between Tyler Shuck and Anthony Brown. It's a fairly level playing field in that regard because while Shuck's been with the program for a couple of years, they did change offensive coordinators, Joe Moorhead, this offseason. And yes, while Shuck got 4 practices, it's still just 4 practices. And yeah, I know the virtual meeting times and those kinds of things, but ultimately, that's not going to be what separates and decides a quarterback competition. So it's going to be interesting. Bottom line is in this preseason camp, workouts and walkthroughs and camp situation, for sure, it's the position battle that is going to be of most importance and greatest intrigue for good reason. There are a few others, but this one is definitely most important and most intriguing, where you have a returning player who, for all intents and purposes, had, quote unquote, done the right thing and put himself in position, waited his turn. And beyond all that, not just the guy who just happened to be there by default, had shown flashes at times, showed it in the spring game a year ago, that he's clearly got some talent and ability that made fans feel at ease about the idea of replacing Justin Herbert. Well, now bringing in a grad transfer, we all know that grad transfers with 1 year left at quarterback don't like to go places that they don't feel like they have a great chance to win the job. If not, it's basically being given to them. Well, all I can tell you is that Mario Cristobal isn't giving the job to anybody. That's not how this program operates. So there will be a competition. And speaking to Anthony Brown's private quarterback trainer, Quincy Avery, it said I'd asked him this back at the time and said, look, the way I kind of laid it out to Anthony was, if you want to try and make a move to the NFL, what makes you think you're going to win an NFL job if you can't win a college job? So you're going there because you like the opportunity and the competition, but that's it. It's competition. There is nothing that's going to be given to them. So we'll see. But it's definitely intriguing. If nothing else, they could end up with 2 guys who are totally viable options. I'm not suggesting they're going to go with a 2 quarterback model, but they're definitely going to have some options.
So they lost Justin Herbert as a high first-round draft pick last year, a guy who will probably be a high first-round draft pick next year, someone who I think Ohio State fans might at least have heard the name, but probably don't have a great sense for exactly how good this is. Penee Sewell, incredible offensive tackle. It shapes up as potentially a really exciting matchup to watch against some of Ohio State's talented defensive ends, whether it's Zach Harrison or Tyreek Smith or Jonathan Cooper, whoever it is. How just give people an idea how dominating Penee Sewell really was last year.
Oh, good grief. Look, in his 2 years, now granted, his freshman year, he missed half the season due to a high ankle sprain, to an injury. So he's only played a season and a half. He won the Outland Trophy as a true sophomore at 19 years old. Was not charged with allowing a sack all of last season. And a big part of why he won the Outland Trophy in that regard. It's hard to put into words as far as just the sheer dominance. Now, that said, everything in context, right? He is by far and away the best offensive lineman in the country. Was last year and is the best returning this year, to be clear. And if you go by several prognosticators, not only projected to be a top 3 pick in the NFL draft as basically a mortal lock, but in a wide gap between him and the next Stephen offensive lineman in that regard. Having said all that, this was against Pac-12 competition as a whole. As a whole, there were a couple of instances where whether it was Auburn in the season opener or Wisconsin in the Rose Bowl, where the competition was a bit different. But the reason why I say it's Pac-12 competition is, listen, first Pac-12 defensive lineman to come off the board, didn't come in the first and second rounds. And the defensive lineman of the year, defensive player of the year in the conference was Bradley Anae, and he was the last pick in the 5th round of the draft. So let's not make this out to be where he went against, 12 first rounders during the course of the season either. He did not. He did face some tremendous talent in the Auburn season opener. Got a couple of reps up against Eric Brown, but Brown's a tackle, so they really weren't matched up against each other very, very much. They actually were matched up against each other in the Outland Trophy, ironically enough. But he did match up with Marlon Davidson quite a bit, and Davidson was picked in the top 50 NFL draft, and he had said that Penee Sewell was best tackle. Him and Andy Thomas of Georgia, who was drafted high this year, were the best tackles he faced in his career. And he faced up against Wisconsin, and I know obviously Ohio State fans know that defense well, and Wisconsin's really talented defense and talented defensive players who had racked up all kinds of sacks. Well, they didn't do anything in the Rose Bowl. So, no, he was absolutely dominant, albeit largely against very inferior competition, but also held Anae totally in check in the Pac-12 championship game. And against better competition, he had dominated them too. And bottom line is the reason why he's being compared early. And again, this is only a young man who's played 2 seasons, really a season and a half of college football. But he is being compared to Orlando Pace. And that's a name that Ohio State fans know well. So he is the potential and possibilities are limitless for what Penee Sewell can do at the offensive tackle position.
You can find James on Twitter at James Crepea. I would highly recommend following him. Has a lot of interesting and insightful content on Oregon football that you are going to probably want to check out between now and September 12th. You can read him at the Oregonian. James, thank you for joining us. Hope to see you out in Autzen in a few months.
Sounds good. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you for listening. Make sure you find us on Apple Podcasts, your podcast apps of choice. You can subscribe, rate, and review us there. And check out BuckeyeScoop.com. We've got great free content, plus even more insight, analysis, and insider reports in our members section. And you can sign up before July 4th to be a part of our Founders Club and receive some additional great benefits. Have a great day. We will talk to you tomorrow.